In this video, I want to talk about how some of the things that you face in everyday life may not just be life. It may not be because you are depressed. It may not be because you have an attitude problem. It may not be because of those particular things. You may actually be up against a spiritual attack. You may be going through spiritual warfare. And in this video, I want to shed light on why it's important to notice and to be able to identify whether you're going through a natural attack or a spiritual attack. So stay tuned. When it comes to spiritual warfare, first I want to preface this by saying that everything is not spiritual warfare. So I don't want you to take things from this video and apply it in areas of your life and just equate everything to being spiritual warfare, because everything is not spiritual warfare. Now, certain things can open you up to spiritual warfare, but everything is not spiritual warfare. And if you equate everything to being spiritual warfare, you will now minimize the effort that needs to be put in to be able to make sure you don't get in that situation again. An example of that would be maybe you're just undisciplined with your money, so every month you may have to borrow money. You may not have discipline with your eating habits, so this is why you can't seem to lose weight, or this is why you can't seem to hit your end of your goals or fitness goals. You may be undisciplined with your mouth, so you may say things to people, and in their response, they may say something that offends you, which makes you feel disrespected. So those areas aren't necessarily spiritual warfare. They are undisciplined, lack of wisdom, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. And so those areas can cause you to feel some type of way, but those areas aren't particularly spiritual warfare. And so what do I mean by spiritual warfare? Spiritual warfare in simplest forms is when the enemy uses something that you can see to hide something that you can't see, to make you forego or abandon your commitment, your calling, your character, or conscience in God. It's when the enemy uses the pressure and the oppression of life to constantly weigh you down, to make you either forego or abandon your commitment to what you told God. For an example, for someone who made a commitment to God to be abstinent, the enemy likes to use your commitment to God and to test it to see if that's really what you're willing to withhold from. Make sure you're really willing to withhold from doing that. The enemy you could say, hey, I'm no longer going to drink. And the enemy could use your friends. Your friends aren't the issue. The enemy is just using them as leverage to get you to go to a bar, to put you in temptation's way. You could say, you know what, I'm no longer going to disrespect or say negative words to my spouse. And the enemy uses your past life, and he uses the weight of certain things, and he allows people to say certain things to you, and he brings up old things from how people used to talk to you to make sure you never get out of a cycle. And so what I'm saying is that when you go through spiritual warfare, it can be an act, or it is an act for you to forego or abandon your commitment, your calling, your character, and your conscience to God. And a lot of times we look at these things, and these things are hidden in natural and in plain sight. An example of this would be married people. Say you are married and you and your spouse continually gets into arguments, and you can't seem to get out of this repetitive cycle of an argument. And so you go and you conversate and things seem to go well, and then it decides to take a turn for the worst. And then now you feel some type of way and they feel some type of way. And even though this started with miscommunication, this started with a disagreement, the enemy likes to hide things the enemy likes to use things you can see and hide things you can't see. And in that moment, what happens is that it started as a disagreement. It started as you guys having a conversation. It started as you guys not seeing eye to eye. And in the process of that, you guys not being able to be on the same page, the enemy uses that to now sow maybe insecurity, maybe doubt. Maybe he likes to use mindsets. He now starts to use feelings and emotions. He now starts to use division. So now it is causing you to question your commitment in God, your clarity. Did you hear God correctly? As, is this the person I'm supposed to be married to? Because they can't seem to understand this simple task. Is this who I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life with? Because this is something that is so small that was blown out of proportion. Another example of that could be maybe you just got laid off from your job, and the fear of not being able to bring in a paycheck now produces some anxiety. And then the anxiety allows you to go into a state of depression. And that state of depression is so hard for you to get out of every time you try to fight back, every time you go to a job interview, every time you go somewhere. Each time you get a no, or each time they reject you, it seems as if though it's weighing on you heavier and heavier. These are things that the enemy like to use to prevent us from actually seeing that we're going through spiritual warfare. It happens to all of us, whether we want to admit it or not, whether we believe that spiritual warfare is a thing, whether we believe the devil is a real entity. Spiritual warfare is something that we all go through. Being able to identify whether it's spiritual warfare or this is a natural circumstance that needs to be taken care of with enlightenment, empowerment, needs to be taken care of through wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, more studying, more conversation. It is important to identify those things, because once you identify them, it will allow you to now be able to put a better plan of action to be able to know how to fight these particular things. An example of that is, or for an example, how you view a thing or your perspective of a thing determines how you fight a thing. Meaning that if you see it as an act of spiritual warfare, now you know that you need to go into prayer. You know you need to spend time in the presence of God. You know you need to spend more time in your word. You know you need to maybe fast. You know you need to get around a community that is able to strengthen you. Proverbs 27:17, it says iron sharpens iron. One man sharpens another through discussion. So maybe you need to get amongst people that is able to strengthen you in that time. But if it's a natural thing, maybe you need to now get a coach, life coach. Maybe you need to talk to a counselor. Maybe you need to talk to a therapist and be able to help you identify and be able to work through some of these things. Understanding the difference in those things is important, because if you try to fight, you cannot fight a supernatural battle with natural weapons. It does not work that way. The natural weapons do not have enough power to overcome the supernatural experience. And so if you are trying to fight, for an example, if you're trying to fight division with only going through counseling, or if you're trying to fight division, say you're going through a situation and it's causing division, if you're only trying to fight that with going through counseling, that's one part of the equation. But also being able to identify what caused the division, what is the division about, and understanding that the division is sent to allow you to abandon and forego your commitment, your calling, and your character to Christ. It will allow you to now be more aware and identify it, so therefore you can now put a plan together to be more aware of that situation. But if you're only fighting division with, let's say, counseling, what tends to happen is that when that same situation or circumstance comes up again and you have not clearly identified whatever it is specifically, then the enemy can continue to use the same situation over and over again to get you. And in John 10:10, it says, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. So I've said this in multiple videos, but I'll say it again. The enemy's sole purpose is to make sure that he can steal your commitment, your calling, your clarity, your comfort, your just who you are in serving Christ. He's looking to be able to steal everything that is Christ-like from you so that you can kill and destroy yourself. The enemy's purpose is just to steal something from you so that in one season, so when you go back when you go forward in a previous season and try to reach back for that particular thing, that it's no longer there, and it causes spiritual warfare on a new level. So understanding these principles and understanding these particular things, I think it's important to realize that some of the things that you go through aren't always going to be natural things. Some of the things are going to be hidden in natural things, but they're actually spiritual attacks. And when we are able to realize these things, we are able to get an upper hand on the enemy, because we can fight wars and we can fight battles the way God actually intended us to fight them, and that's with his word. That's with prayer. That's with worship. That's with thanksgiving. That's with spending time in his presence. That's with spending time in community. And so understanding, and I want you to identify some of the things that you've been going through in your life, whether it's relationship, job, money, health, whether it's family, regardless of what it is, I want you to identify. And also one of the biggest things is also identify with self. Identify some of the things within yourself, because a lot of times what ends up happening is that how we grew up, the things that we learned from our parents, the ways that what we learned in our household, some of the traditions that have been passed down. I do want you to understand that traditions aren't just about food and dishes and about clothes and quilts. Traditions are also mindsets. Traditions are also certain habits. Traditions are also certain patterns that developed in your household, but they came from their parents. And so now they've been passed down. And you have to be the one to identify and recognize if you want to continue the tradition that's continually going on in your home. I'm not talking about breaking generational curses in terms of money. That's good. I'm talking about breaking generational curses in terms of characteristics, in terms of mindsets. I'm talking about in terms of health conditions, in terms of finances can be one of them, but also identifying it on every area. God wants us to prosper in all areas, not just in specific areas. And so understanding that some things that you may have been battling may not be everyday life, just lifing. Sometimes it could be a spiritual attack that's hidden in everyday life. And if you're not able to identify it, you will continue to think that life is not for you when God has already given us life and given it to us more abundantly. That's what Ephesians 3:20 talks about. And so I hope this video helps you guys. You will realize that at the very beginning, probably the first 10 minutes, that I realized I didn't have my mic in, and I'll go back and do some editing. I'll listen to it. Hopefully the audio is good, but if this video helped you, comment down below and let me know some of the things that you've been enduring, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.